I was born and raised in North Dakota. Back when I was in high school, a group of us would research murders that occurred out in the county. We would then go out to find the scenes and film the exploration at night. This was about 2 years before Blair Witch. It was something to do while we got wasted on shitty beer and teenage bullshit. Eventually, we ran out of places to go and got really good at finding abandoned rural farmsteads by driving dirt roads and looking for the signs. Rut roads, deliberate tree groves, and old mailbox posts were common markers. We were out looking when we spotted a tree grove that was out of place, sure sign, and drove through the field and discovered an old, but not too old, house. It had padlocks on the outside doors that were knocked off pretty easily. We dispatched of them and entered the kitchen. There were 6 of us, all with flashlights, and we lit up the kitchen/dining area fairly easily. The table was the initial thing you noticed, and it was strange because of how normal it looked. It was set for a meal, and not a bowl was out of place. Only thing was, we'd been in dozens of these houses, and place settings were a first, especially unbroken ones. As we investigated the area, we found the fridge had the disgusting remnants of a full stock, and the cupboards were full of canned and dry foods. This was also a first. One guy found mail on the counter from early June 1978, and another found a creepy-ass TV guide in the living room with UFOs on the cover. All the family photos were hanging up, mom, dad, bro, and sis in their 1970s glory. Furniture was dusty, but in good condition. Closets were full. Everything was totally normal, which was super abnormal. As we dug around the house, we all started to realize that this house had not been moved out of. It had been straight up abandoned. Imagine locking the door to your house and never coming back. That's the state this house was in. Complete unplanned departure. We went upstairs and split into 3 pairs to check out the 3 rooms. Ours was the closest, and obviously it was the younger boy's room. I can't describe what it looked like too well, because almost right away from the hall, we heard the most fucking terrifying scream I've ever had the misfortune of hearing. We went running into the hallway, and were all yelling questions at each other at the same time. After a few really long seconds, the 2 screamers caught their breath and said, "You have to go in and see." Walking down the hall and through the doorway, I prayed I wouldn't act like a pussy in front of my friends. I shouldn't have been concerned because the others were as scared as I was. The room itself opened up to the left of the doorframe, and centered on the right side of the room was a queenish-sized bed, propped up on pillows with the blanket drawn to the waist, arms on top of the blanket, and worst of all, head turned slightly so it was looking you straight in the eyes when you entered the room, was a life-sized porcelain doll. Snow-white skin, jet-black hair, cold, dead eyes. The dead eyes lit up with our flashlights, like she was waiting for us. If the head hadn't been turned, I could excuse it, but it was turned, ready for when we walked in, ready for 20 years. Hasty fucking exits were made down the stairs and into the car. It was during the ride we started to get even more creeped out when we realized that even though the house had been abandoned, someone had taken the time to set up that goddamn doll. Not packing food, clothes, or family photos. Setting up the doll was one of the last things done in this house. We researched their names, but got nothing. No tragic car accident, no grisly massacre, no extended family. Just a tacky time capsule in the middle of nowhere. We found out that the county had taken possession of the land for non-payment of taxes, explaining the locks, but never tracked down any more information on what happened to them, or why they left that doll.
I was about 4 or 5 years old, and my parents had just separated. My mom was living in a 2-bedroom apartment. I had my own room, but I preferred to sleep in her bed whenever I was staying with her. Our 2 bedrooms were at the end of a hallway, directly across from each other. Our apartment was on the first floor, and I remember that it was in the middle of the summer, and my mom had a window open in our room, which was directly behind the bed, above the headboard. Anyways, I woke up in the middle of the night and remember sitting up and seeing that our cat was sitting in the door frame of my mom's room. Her door was open and you could partially see into my bedroom. This was strange because our cat was typically always in bed with us. As I was watching him, he walked into my bedroom and meowed. I turned to face my mom and wake her up. In the 3-4 seconds it took her to wake up and ask me what was wrong, we both looked back up in the door frame, and there was a man standing by my open door, making his way out of my bedroom. I still don't know how she managed to do it so quickly, but my mother proceeded to pick me up and literally throw me out of the screen window. Again, we were on the first floor and it was maybe a 3-foot drop to the ground. She quickly followed, and we were able to start screaming for help, and someone called 911. The police came but didn't see any signs of forced entry, only that our front door was unlocked, which led them to believe the man must have exited that way. The strange thing was that my mom swore up and down that she had locked the door that night with the deadbolt and chain lock. About a week later, she was cleaning the kitchen and opened up our water heater closet and found a notebook with names and drawings, as well as a pair of gloves and some gum wrappers. The police were called again, but all they could do was speculate that the man had been in our house and hid until we were asleep. Just to clarify, our apartment was on the ground level, so my mother didn't hurl me into potential paralysis, just a 3-ish foot drop to grass.
I used to think I've only had one paranormal experience, which happened recently, but thinking back, I actually had two. Back in the 1990s, my parents owned a cabin out in the Virginia woods. My mother and sister would go there and stay. My mother and sister said the cabin was haunted, but I never believed it. They claimed that in the middle of the night, something would open the locked doors and they would wake up to the doors being wide open. My mother said either someone had keys to the place and was tormenting them, or the cabin was haunted. I laughed it off. I never believed in the supernatural. Then one winter, I had bought a 4-wheel drive and it was supposed to snow that night, so I thought it would be cool to drive out to the cabin and camp there during the winter, during the snowstorm. So I got there, and it was very cold, so I lit a fire, but it wasn't warming the cabin at all. Remembering the stories, I locked the doors and double-checked them. I went to bed with my clothes on and under a heavy blanket. I fell asleep and I had a terrible nightmare. I dreamed I woke up and there was wind blowing in the bedroom, so I walked into the main room and the door was wide open with snow on the floor. As I walked into the room, I turned and there was a tall demonic creature with shiny black skin and glowing red eyes standing to my right, and then I woke up. I laid in the bed for a few minutes and I realized that it seemed like it had gotten colder, and I decided to go and see if the fire had gone out. I walked into the main room and the door was wide open and the outside porch light shining illuminated the snow that had blown in on the floor, and I suddenly realized the dream was coming true, and I panicked and turned to my right, but it was pitch black. I couldn't see anything. I fumbled for the light switch like a crazy person, and when the light came on, there was nothing there. I walked over to the open door and looked out, and there were about 2 inches of snow on the ground, and there were no footprints to be seen. The fire was out, so I decided to just pack up and go home. I never spent another night there. Never again entering a stranger's house. I'm a 23-year-old woman. I was looking to get a used stove online. I came across this person that was selling what I was looking for, so I went for it. We talked on the phone. Since it was pretty heavy, I was going to go to her place and try it. That sounds so dumb, I know. I went anyways, and she was waiting in front of this huge apartment building in my city that I usually drove by.
She was probably in her late 30s and she seemed fine as first, a bit nervous, but nothing out of the ordinary. The first thing I noticed about her apartment was that it was almost empty. I thought maybe she's moving or something. We went to the kitchen where the stove stood. I was glad there was actually a stove there. I was checking if it worked fine when her phone rang, and I could hear a man's voice on the line. Then she said this stove belongs to her BF and he wanted me to pay more for it. By that time, I was just trying to get it over with. I felt really weird. I wanted to get out as fast as possible. I felt like I was suffocating. I guess she sensed that. That's when she started visibly sweating and raising her voice, trying to convince me that I need to talk to discuss it with her BF. I was worried he might come. I don't want to be alone in the same room with these two freaks. He seemed like he was taking too much time to get there, and she grew restless. I knew I had to get out before he gets there, so I was like, "I'll take it then. Let me grab the money from my car." And she was following. I can't explain the atmosphere of that freaking apartment. I could literally breathe once I stepped out of that doorway. She was still walking behind me. I just outwalked her, got into my car, and drove away. I immediately blocked that numb.
Camping at a friend's family property with a group of friends. They had a huge, dingy shop full of old tools and old furniture that was super creepy. Dirt floor, clown paintings in the loft, not even kidding. We stayed up late drinking by the fire and I was the last one awake. Went to go pee on the side of the shop and stood about 5 feet away looking inside through the window. There was a fluorescent light on and I noticed what looked like a piece of paper or dollar kind of floating around. I thought it was a moth at first, but it was moving in a very flowing figure 8 pattern that was very rhythmic. It reminded me of dangling a carrot. I watched it for maybe 20 seconds, which felt like forever. Then it quickly floated back to the corner of the shop where it was dark. There was also a wood chair near the corner that added to the creepiness. Could have been a moth, though. I sat back down by the fire to finish my beer and have a smoke. No one else was awake, so I played Robot Unicorn Attack 2 on my phone for a while. I noticed my friend Mark pop out of his tent to pee, then go back in to go to sleep. I decided sleep sounded good, so I went to my tent and fell asleep. The next morning, we were having breakfast, and Mark said, "I saw you guys sitting by the fire super late. How late did you stay up?" I told him it was probably 2 or 3 a.m. Then he said, "Who was up with you?" I told him I was the last man standing. He said, "I got up to pee and saw you on your phone and 2 people over your shoulder watching you play." He said one person looked bigger, so he thought it was one of our friends, who was a bigger dude. He said the other person was taller and skinny, but none of us are noticeably tall or skinny. Freaked me out. We still camp at that property once a year, but I don't go in the shop, and I go to sleep whenever my wife decides she's tired.